She called the sheriff because my daughter dropped a fishing line in her lake. What she didn't know, I legally owned the road to her house. 3 days later, I gave her an eviction notice on her manicured lawn. If you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare or a petty neighbor drunk on fake authority, subscribe. You'll want to hear how this one ended. Northern Michigan mornings smell like pine and fresh water. That day it was misty. The lake was still, silver, and quiet, until a white Lexus SUV pulled up near my gravel driveway. My 9-year-old daughter Zoe was sitting beside me on the dock, rod in hand, learning how to cast. We hadn't even caught a fish when the sheriff arrived. That's how it started. Blue lights flashing. Darlene Crestwood waving her arms like we'd committed a felony for touching water she didn't own. She lived 2 doors down, in a massive Victorian with flower beds that looked photoshopped. Ralph Lauren from head to toe. Heavy perfume you could smell from 30 feet away. She called it her lake. But I had the deed. 6 months earlier, I'd moved here to start over. Divorce finalized, consulting firm sold. I just wanted peace. I picked Lake Harmon because it reminded me of old summers in Michigan. Bought a 1970s fixer-upper ranch for $340,000. It had problems, rotting dock, leaky roof, but the view sold me. 200 feet of lakeshore. The kind of space you imagine raising your kid in. My name's Marcus Whitfield. I'm 43. Used to work in commercial real estate, specializing in distressed assets. The kind of guy who reads footnotes on contracts for fun. That kind of boring saves you money, though, and sometimes a whole lot more. The realtor, Earl, had vaguely mentioned quirky neighborhood politics. I figured that meant old folks with opinions. Nothing serious. Zoe loved the lake instantly. It was our bright spot during custody transitions. I spent my first weeks knee-deep in repairs, feeling useful for the first time in years. And then came Darlene. She strutted down my dock on heels like it was a red carpet. "You'll need to submit a waterfront usage application," she chirped, all fake smiles and passive menace. She handed me a 3-page packet, stamped with the logo of something called the Lake Harmon Shores Preservation Committee. Wanted $500 a year for maintenance. There were rules about what color I could paint my dock. Guest limits. Boat size caps. I laughed politely. I owned the shoreline. Public lake. Her smile froze. "Everyone who matters participates," she said, voice suddenly sharper. "You'll regret making waves." That night, I searched county records. No HOA registered for this area. I called Earl. His voice went tight. "It's just a Darlene thing. Most people just pay to avoid trouble." That should have been the moment I started taking notes. Week 2, I got cookies from a sweet 71-year-old neighbor named Betty. She leaned in before leaving and whispered, "Darlene doesn't handle no very well. Just be careful." She wasn't exaggerating. One quiet Saturday morning, barely 7 a.m., Zoe and I are back on the dock. Thermos of coffee in hand. She's casting, giggling. Then the sound of sneakers on planks. Darlene again, this time in workout clothes and a sun visor. "You're in violation of quiet hours," she snapped. "No waterfront activity before 9 a.m. "There's no HOA," I told her. "We're just fishing." She started snapping pictures with her phone. Violating community standards. Endangering the ecosystem. She pulled out a laminated card with Lake Harmon Covenant, written in bold script. It looked official, until I asked for the county recording number. She didn't have one. The next business day, I drove to the county recorder's office. Janine, the clerk, helped me dig through the archives. We found nothing. No active HOA. No covenants recorded since 1985, and even those had expired. I printed everything and dropped a polite letter in Darlene's mailbox. No legal HOA, no restrictions. Please stop pretending otherwise. 2 days later, her husband Roland showed up on my porch. Smiling too much. Cologne choking the air. "Let's be reasonable," he said. "It's not about rules, it's about maintaining property values." His tone shifted as he scanned my aging roof. "You wouldn't want code enforcement poking around." The next morning, code enforcement truck in my driveway. Inspector said there'd been a complaint. Found nothing wrong but looked exhausted. "We get a lot of calls from this street," he muttered. It hit me. This wasn't about a lake. It was about power. Darlene was used to ruling this block. She didn't like someone asking questions. So I started documenting every visit, every letter, every threat. 1 week later, neighbors stopped making eye contact. Betty stopped waving. Then I found an anonymous note in my mailbox. "Troublemakers don't last long here. Sell now." Around the same time, Zoe got uninvited from a Halloween party. Her classmate's mom said we were problem people. That was the final straw. I started talking to neighbors. Quietly. Turns out 5 families had been paying Darlene's fees for years. Some for 8 years. Over $20,000 collected in total. When I asked why, the answer was always the same: it's easier than fighting. One guy, Greg, a plumber, said he once refused to pay. Suddenly, he couldn't get township permits for his work van. Another family got left off the invite list for the community picnic. Darlene controlled everything: book clubs, holiday parties, even school volunteers. And it was all fake. Real HOAs have elections, financial reports, legal records. This was one woman running an extortion racket under the banner of community standards. So I contacted the Michigan Attorney General's office. They were interested, but they needed evidence. And I planned to get it. Next thing I knew, I was walking into Darlene's home during one of her committee meetings. 7 neighbors in stiff chairs. Candles everywhere. She played hostess and dictator in one breath. I calmly asked to see incorporation papers and financial records. She called the cops. A young deputy showed up. Darlene painted me as a lunatic crashing her private home. I showed him the email invitation, sent to all residents. The deputy pulled me aside. "Just leave. These people have pull." I left, but I wasn't done. That night, I stayed up digging through property records. That's when I found something strange. The original developer of the subdivision had gone bankrupt in the 90s. The assets, roads, easements, even management rights, they were sold at auction. Question was, who bought them? I didn't know it yet, but the answer to that would change everything. I didn't sleep that night. My brain wouldn't shut off. Roads, easements, auction, developer bankruptcy. Somewhere in the mess of county deeds and forgotten transactions was a key, and I was going to find it. By 2 a.m., I had cross-referenced every plot line, drainage easement, and roadway in the subdivision. The puzzle wasn't complicated. It was just buried. Turns out, when the original developer of Lake Harmon Shores filed bankruptcy in 1996, the assets were liquidated in chunks. Most of the lakefront lots had already been sold to homeowners. But the infrastructure? Roads, sidewalks, culverts, drainage zones? Those remained part of the Lake Harmon management entity. A shell company that, after foreclosure, had gone to auction. And that auction? Public record. I clicked through scanned documents and found the winning bid. $14,000. Paid in full. Buyer, an LLC registered in Illinois under the name Whitfield Ventures. I blinked. That was me. Back in my real estate days, I had bought distressed portfolios at auction all the time. Old hotels, motels, cracked parking lots. Sometimes, the deals were bundled. I had completely forgotten. This road parcel had been included in a 43 property package I bought in 2011. At the time, it was worth practically nothing. A weedy stretch of asphalt in a state I didn't live in. I'd left it on the books. And now, I owned every square inch of road in Lake Harmon Shores. Every inch that Darlene walked her golden retriever across. Every patch of pavement where she placed private road, no trespassing signs. Let that sink in. She had been calling the cops on me for standing on a dock I legally owned, while trespassing herself every day on roads I owned outright. And now I had proof. I called my lawyer first thing in the morning. Ken's been with me for 12 years. He's calm, methodical, and ruthless in a tie. I sent him the deed, the plat map, the original bankruptcy filings, and the tax receipts I'd quietly paid for years without realizing what they were. He called me back laughing. You own her access to the world. I wasn't in the mood to gloat. Not yet. Because legally owning something and enforcing that ownership are two different things. And I knew Darlene. She wasn't going to bow out quietly. So I went slow. First, I filed a quitclaim confirmation with the township. Public notice that I held full ownership of Parcel 8B, all interior roads, sidewalks, and curb strips of the Lake Harmon subdivision. That alone stirred the hornet's nest. Word got out quickly. Betty came back, this time offering an apology and rhubarb pie. Then I hired a private security firm. Not for force, just optics. 2 uniformed guards, 1 vehicle, clearly labeled Private Road Patrol. They started patrolling twice a day, noting license plates, monitoring speeders, issuing polite warnings to tailgaters and rule breakers. Darlene's reaction? Explosive. She marched up to the guard vehicle, iPhone out, demanding badge numbers. Threatened lawsuits. Called the sheriff again. This time, the deputy reviewed the paperwork and nodded. He owns it, ma'am. Just like you own your driveway. You'd think that would be the end. But no. The next week, her HOA newsletter, yes, she still called it that, ran a new headline, Invasion of Privacy. Newcomer seizes community roads. She claimed I was building a private prison. That I intended to gate the neighborhood. That she feared for the safety of children. I did none of those things. Instead, I sent out a letter. Not from me, from Whitfield Ventures LLC. Neutral tone. Respectful. Just the facts. As the legal owner of the roads, I'd be reassessing maintenance agreements. A voluntary contribution of $300 per household would cover snow removal, pothole repairs, and basic upkeep. Failure to contribute wouldn't restrict access, yet, but would disqualify the household from maintenance protections. Out of 22 homes, 16 paid within a week. And Darlene? She sent me a handwritten letter soaked in lavender oil that ended with, "You will not silence me. This is spiritual warfare." By now, I had supporters. People who'd been bullied into silence were finally coming forward. Greg offered to testify about the fake permits. Betty had old emails showing Darlene using HOA letterheads to demand payments. A tech-savvy teen even built me a timeline of every fake policy Darlene had ever circulated. We were building a case. Then came the final straw. Darlene blocked one of the guards with her Lexus, screaming that she was being militarized against. She dialed 911 and claimed kidnapping. The sheriff came himself. But this time I was ready. I handed him every document, every deed, every public filing. It took 30 minutes. At the end, the sheriff turned to her and said, "Ma'am, if you continue filing false reports, we'll be pressing charges." She went quiet. The very next day, she began dismantling the so-called Lake Harmon Preservation Committee. Took down the website. Deleted the Facebook group. Returned $2,000 in recent dues. Her reign was collapsing. I didn't cheer. I sent one last notice. All prior restrictions declared by the now-defunct committee were void. Residents were free to repaint docks, host parties, park where they wanted, within the law. And if they had questions, my LLC would hold a quarterly open forum to discuss real concerns. Transparently, legally, respectfully. Darlene didn't attend. 2 weeks later, a real estate sign appeared in front of her home. For sale. Cash buyers only. No HOA disclosures required. And just like that, the queen of the lake was gone. But the roads? The lakefront? The dock where Zoe and I fish every Saturday? Still mine. And always will be. Things were finally settling down around the lake. Or so I thought. The roads were quiet. Most residents had come around. My Saturday mornings were now spent fishing off the same dock that Karen once claimed was against community harmony. Kids were biking again, unbothered by phantom HOA rules. Even old Mr. Langley, who hadn't left his porch in months, waved when I passed by. But if I've learned anything about people like Darlene, people drunk on control, it's that they never leave without throwing one final punch. It started small. Mysterious complaints began trickling in, calls to the zoning board about unauthorized commercial activity. Someone claimed I was renting lakeside access to tourists. Another filed a noise complaint over non-existent fireworks. I got a letter from the county inspector requesting access to my boat shed. I knew who was behind it. She had vanished from the community chat, from local Facebook groups, even took her house off the market temporarily. But her hands were still moving behind the curtain, probably calling in favors. She had friends in city departments. She had time. And she had venom. One Tuesday morning, 2 zoning officers showed up unannounced. No warning, no appointment. Routine inspection, they said. I didn't argue. I showed them everything. My permits were airtight. The lake was private, and no business was being conducted. After an hour, they left apologetically. That same week, a deputy showed up. Noise complaints again. Claimed I was hosting raves. My daughter was doing online math tutoring in the living room when he arrived. Even the deputy looked embarrassed. Sorry, sir. We're required to follow up. That night, I checked security camera footage. Darlene wasn't in any of it, but her car drove past my house 7 times between 9 p.m. and midnight. I wasn't even mad. I was impressed. She was unraveling. So I turned the tables. I compiled everything. Every false complaint. Every time her vehicle passed my property. Every public record she'd submitted under the now-defunct HOA's name. The legal violations. The harassment. The attempted intimidation of licensed personnel. And I handed it all to Ken. We're not pressing charges yet, I told him. But she needs to feel the pressure now. He agreed. We drafted a cease and desist. Not a generic warning, but a blow-by-blow legal summary of every offense she'd committed since I moved in, backed by statutes, screenshots, and footage. We sent it to her certified mail and emailed a copy to her real estate agent and lawyer. The effect was immediate. Darlene didn't respond directly. But 3 days later, her car disappeared from the driveway. Her mailbox overflowed. Neighbors whispered she had gone to stay with her sister out of state. But her little empire of fear didn't collapse on its own. One final act remained. A week after she left, a city council member showed up at my gate, unannounced, flanked by a county planner and someone from the environmental board. They claimed to be reviewing concerns about shoreline access, water rights, and historical pathway closures. It was Darlene's Hail Mary. She had tried to get my lake access revoked by alleging that my fencing, yes, the same 6-foot rusty container fence I'd put up legally, was blocking a traditional community right-of-way. There was no such right-of-way. She made it up. Luckily, I'd already anticipated this. I handed them the updated land survey, the signed approval from Public Works, and a copy of the community's original layout from the 1970s showing no easement or shared path. After a tense 30-minute review, the official folded the map and said, "Everything's in order." They left. But as they did, one of them muttered something I'll never forget. She really went all out on this. I didn't have to ask who she was. Later that week, I visited the county clerk's office. Out of curiosity, I asked for any pending property disputes or complaints filed under my name. There were over a dozen. All anonymous. All dead ends. All traced back, eventually, to Darlene's fingerprints. It was over. Really over this time. No more fake newsletters. No more police calls. No more signs duct taped to my trash cans. Just silence. And as for the lake, it never looked better. The fish were biting again. The water was calm. And the air didn't carry the tension of neighborhood wars. People started coming out to say hi. The kids helped me paint the old dock. Someone left a basket of zucchini on my porch. And that Saturday, as I sat on the edge of the pier with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over water I legally owned, I finally allowed myself a smile. Darlene had called the police, tried to block my rights, manipulated the system, fabricated authority, weaponized fear. But she forgot one thing. You can't enforce power you don't have. And when the truth comes out, no HOA tantrum, no golden retriever parade, no fake newsletter can change that. She tried to rule the lake. But I owned the land beneath her throne. The final move didn't happen with sirens or shouting. It happened quietly, the way real power always does. 3 days after the last failed inspection, My attorney called me early in the morning. His voice was calm, professional, almost bored. That's how I knew it was serious. "Marcus, we're clear to proceed." That single sentence carried more weight than every threat Darlene had ever made. The documents had been reviewed twice. Ownership confirmed again. Easement misuse verified. The years of unauthorized control, intimidation, and false authority had finally come back to where they started. On paper, with signatures that mattered. Darlene's house sat on land she never truly controlled. She had access rights, not ownership. Rights that depended on conditions she had violated repeatedly. Conditions that no longer protected her. At 9:12 a.m., the process server delivered the notice. Not a warning. Not a demand. An eviction notice. 30 days. That was it. No drama. No explanation needed. By noon, the entire block knew. People didn't celebrate. They didn't cheer. They just stood quietly in driveways, reading the notice that had been copied and passed around. Some looked relieved. Others looked stunned. A few looked guilty, like they wished they had spoken up sooner. Darlene returned 2 days later. Her Lexus pulled into the driveway like nothing had changed. Same sunglasses. Same posture. Same entitlement. She walked up to her door and froze when she saw the envelope taped to the frame. She ripped it open. I watched from my porch. Not hiding. Not gloating. Just standing there. She read it once. Then again. Then her hands started shaking. She marched across the yard like she had 1,000 times before, but this time there was no audience, no authority behind her words. "This is harassment," she said, voice already cracking. "You can't do this." "I already did," I replied. She threatened lawsuits. Claimed retaliation. Said she'd call the sheriff, the mayor, anyone who would listen. I didn't raise my voice. "Everyone you used before already reviewed the documents," I said. "There's nothing left to argue." That's when it hit her. No system to hide behind. No fake rules. No committee. No leverage. Her power had existed only because people believed it did. Once belief died, so did everything else. She left without another word. The following weeks were quiet but heavy. Contractors showed up to assess her house. A moving company parked out front. The for sale sign went up, then came down again when buyers backed out after learning about the legal history. She tried to negotiate. Her lawyer contacted mine, offering mutual resolution. She wanted extended time. Wanted access restored. Wanted silence. The answer was no. Not because I wanted revenge, but because silence is how people like her survive. On day 29, a moving truck arrived at dawn. Furniture wrapped in plastic. Framed photos loaded without care. The same porch where she once lectured neighbors now echoed with hollow footsteps. She didn't look at me when she passed. By sunset, the house was empty. A week later, the locks were changed. Ownership transferred. The block felt different. Lighter, quieter, safer. Neighbors began talking again. Not in whispers, but openly. Stories came out. Threats, fines, fake violations. Fear that had kept people obedient for years. No one had been weak. They had been isolated. That's how control works. The lake became what it was supposed to be all along. A place for families, for quiet mornings, for kids learning to fish without being treated like criminals. My daughter asked one night, "Is the mean lady coming back?" "No," I told her. "She can't hurt anyone here anymore." That answer mattered more than any legal victory. Months passed. The neighborhood formed a real association. Voluntary, transparent, limited. No fines. No authority over private property. Just maintenance and shared responsibility. I declined any leadership role. I'd already done enough. Sometimes people ask if it was worth it. The stress. The paperwork. The risk. Here's the truth. When someone tries to control your life using lies, walking away doesn't buy peace, it only delays the damage. Standing your ground does. Darlene didn't lose her house because of me. She lost it because she built her life on authority she never had. And when the truth finally arrived, it didn't knock. It evicted her. That lake is quiet now. And every morning, when the mist lifts off the water, it feels like the place finally belongs to the people who live there, not the ones who tried to rule it.